Now, when it comes down to it, Goosebumps is pretty cool. However, there is actually a series which is actually also cool, the SCP Foundation. So I figured that since there are two very, very, very cool series, why not mix them together? That's why I basically thought of this particular SCP object, or a concept, I guess you could say, which honestly might not be good, but it might be good as well. Who knows? It actually is based off an episode of Goosebumps, the TV series, known as the Cucko-Clock of Doom. Yes, this is an actual episode. For those wondering, that episode basically, in a nutshell, which by the way I did just watch it, so yeah, is basically about a kid. I don't remember his name. Let me look at the wiki actually. Let me look at the start wiki. Michael. Basically, there's this kid named Michael and a kid named Tara. Their last name is Webster, by the way. Which, by the way, great last name, by the way. Not to roast anyone. Basically, how should I say this? John gets bullied by Tara, who is or his younger sister, a lot. Which, by the way, I don't even get why, but get why she actually bullies him, but you know, whatever. So he figures that since he got the Cucko-Clock and since I guess he got inherited by the thing, I think. Yeah, basically, the parents told Tara not to touch it. Is basically what basically happened. Apparently enough, John decided, or not John. What was his name? Apparently enough, Michael. Sorry, I keep getting these kids' names up. Okay, sorry. Basically, Michael, sorry, decides to touch it by turning the head 180 degrees. It turns out to be a bad move for him, as he turns out he's going back in a time warp. Going back in time and basically getting younger. In the end, he does actually turn back time to its original. He does go forward in time, but with a twist and going to a different timeline where Terra didn't exist. By just knocking off one of the time dials, I guess. I don't know. Something like that. However, whether that was an SCP, whether the Cuckoo-Clock was an SCP. Well, we're about to find out, don't we? For those wondering, an SCP is basically, if you can't tell, I guess an anomalous creature of some kind. I don't really know exactly what it is. Basically, from what I can tell, it's basically a person, place, or thing that basically has some sort of a property that basically makes them like spooky or makes them unusual or something like that. Something like that, I guess. I don't exactly know the exact specification of being an SCP, but it's something like that. However, how would that even work as an SCP? Well, let's find out, shall we? Obviously, this will basically be more of a safe class SCP, or maybe it'll be a safe class SCP. Yeah, actually, it would be a safe class SCP because, for one thing, it's not actually a moving object. But then again, Then again, you might expect to basically have some people to try and work on it, so it could go on ongoing testing and all sorts of other stuff. So who knows? Basically, here's what I propose for the SCP, or at least the concept for the not the SCP, but basically if it was an SCP, I suppose. If the Cucko-Clock of Doom, or the Cucko-Clock of Doom, rather, from Goosebumps was an SCP, will work like this. Basically, keep it in some sort of a, I guess, a object containment cell, something like that. But keep it in some sort of a thing. Keep it where basically no one can actually find it unless they have some sort of a clearance level. Because we don't want D classes coming up to it and saying, "Hey, I want to use it." No, we want people to know what they're doing with it. We want people to know what they're doing with it because we don't want people to basically say, "I want to kill Hitler." Sorry, I had to say that. Also, I did actually decide to make a few changes to the time dial. From what we can tell, or at least from what I can tell, the basic idea of the time dials, which, by the way, if you can't tell, time dials are just like, you can actually just like, put my display capture, something like that. Window capture. Hang on, let me look up window capture actually. Hold up. Hold up. Here we go. I'm just working on something real quick. Give me a sec. Give me 1 second. If I can actually put this up there for you guys. And then put this right up. Okay. There we go. Basically, this is what I'm working with, by the way. A time dial, if you can't tell, is right down here. That's a time dial. So, what I propose for the SCP is that if one person takes off a time dial, then they probably won't, like, their family heritage will probably just basically not really happen in that, or well, events from that year that have to do with their family won't happen. However, certain events might not happen as well. That's a small chance, however, and that's a very small chance, as there might be some people who, apparently enough, were important and such like that, blah, blah, blah. And keep in mind, there might be important stuff like such as like important things like such as, is there more than one of these? Is there more than, is there 2? Is there 3? We gotta keep in mind. I propose there's actually a total of at least 3, but no more than 100. Mainly because I definitely don't want there to be an oversaturation of these things, but I definitely don't want there to be too little of them. Because just 1 would just basically be just boring, but 2, well, alright, maybe just 2, but not really more than at least 10, rather, but not 100. I know I said 100 before, but now I'm changing it to 10. Anyway. What I'm proposing, however, is something a little bit different. Basically, another thing is that instead of just changing whatever the heck it basically does to the timeline, instead puts you in a different timeline where that thing didn't happen. Yeah, it's kind of an interesting idea, but it might work. And yes, the clock will travel with you as if it was like a time machine. I know, I'm weird. Now, as for the bird, it'll work mainly the same way as it did before. Mess with the bird, like twist its head or take it off, and it'll basically just be broken, and you'll basically go back in time and age rapidly backwards. However, the thing is, I do want to make it somewhat different. I do want to make it somewhat like an interesting idea instead of just that. What I am thinking of is basically making it go through a different timeline where basically you didn't exist, but it's only on a rare occasion. That's just my own opinion. We'll have to see, though. We'll have to see. But that's only if you actually remove it, but, you know. But, or, it could be if you remove it, or, I don't know. It could be something. It could be something. That's all I gotta say about that. And overall, it could be kind of an interesting idea for Marshall Carter and Dark to basically be a part of this SCP. But who knows? Who knows? Overall, this is actually going to be a pretty interesting idea to actually, if you want to type it out, or if you just want to basically make some sort of a draft for it. But don't basically make it like some sort of a very, 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 very heavily inspired, or rather just a reference heavy SCP. Because definitely don't want to basically be heavy reference heavy for the entirety of the thing. You know? So yeah. Overall, it is interesting, and I hope you enjoy. I'm Nano Gamer, also known as your Burke. There's a Discord link in my description, and I am out.